My brother demanded I pay off his $30,000 college debt because our parents couldn't. I said no. Then I found out the real reason he was broke. Growing up, my brother Tyler was the golden child, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. He got the bigger bedroom, the better birthday parties, the college fund. I got hand-me-downs and a part-time job at 16 to pay for my own stuff. I learned to accept it, but when Tyler showed up at my door demanding I fix his financial mess because he was family, I finally said no. And what happened after that changed everything between us forever. I'm the older sibling, 2 years older than Tyler. You'd think that would mean something in our family, but it never did. From the time Tyler was born, he was the star, the boy, the one who'd carry on the family name. That's how my parents saw it anyway. When we were kids, it was small things. He got the new toys, I got the used ones. He got to pick where we went for dinner. I had to go along with it. He got a car when he turned 16. I had to save up and buy my own at 18. My parents said it built character, that I needed to learn responsibility. Tyler went to a private university, full tuition, room and board, spending money, everything paid for by our parents. I went to community college and worked 2 jobs to cover it. When I asked my parents why they couldn't help me the way they helped Tyler, they said the money was tight, that Tyler's school was more expensive so they had to prioritize. They promised they'd help me later. They never did. I graduated with no debt because I worked myself half to death. Tyler graduated with $30,000 in student loans because apparently the college fund ran out and my parents had to take loans to cover his last 2 years. They never explained why the money disappeared, just said things happened. After college, I got a decent job in marketing. Nothing crazy, but enough to live comfortably. I rented a small apartment, saved money, built a life for myself. Tyler moved back home. He said he was looking for the right opportunity, that he didn't want to settle for just any job. He wanted something that matched his degree and his potential. 2 years went by. Tyler was still at home, still looking. My parents supported him, paid for everything, said he was being smart by waiting for the right position. I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't my business. Then one day, Tyler showed up at my apartment unannounced. He looked stressed. He said he needed to talk. I let him in, made coffee, asked what was wrong. He told me his student loan payments were starting, that he owed $30,000 and couldn't afford the monthly payments. He said our parents couldn't help because they were still paying off the loans they took for his last 2 years. He said he needed me to help him, as family. I asked what he meant by help. He said he needed me to take over his payments for a while, just until he got on his feet. Maybe a year or 2. He'd pay me back eventually. I stared at him. He was serious. He actually thought I should pay his debt. I asked why he couldn't get a job, any job, even if it wasn't his dream job. He said he'd been applying but nothing felt right, that he couldn't take just anything after working so hard for his degree. I told him no. I said I worked 2 jobs to avoid debt, that I couldn't afford to take on his payments on top of my own expenses, that he needed to figure it out himself. He got angry, said I was being selfish, that family helps family, that I clearly had money since I had my own apartment and a decent job, that it wouldn't kill me to help him out. I told him to leave. He did, but not before saying I'd regret turning my back on him. That night, my mom called. She said Tyler told her I refused to help him. She said she was disappointed in me, that Tyler was struggling, and I should be there for him. I tried to explain my side, but she cut me off, said I'd always been jealous of Tyler, that I needed to grow up and stop holding grudges. My dad called the next day, same speech, said I was being petty, that Tyler needed help and I was the only one who could give it. I asked why Tyler couldn't just get a job. My dad said it wasn't that simple, that the job market was tough, that Tyler was trying his best. I hung up on him. My dad said it wasn't that simple, that the job market was tough, that Tyler was trying his best. I hung up on him. The calls didn't stop. My parents called every few days trying to guilt me into helping Tyler. My aunt called. My grandmother called. Everyone had an opinion about how I should be more supportive, how family comes first, how I was being cold and selfish. Nobody asked why Tyler Tyler couldn't just work at a coffee shop or retail store while looking for something better. Nobody questioned why a 25-year-old man was still living at home with no job 2 years after graduating. It was all about me being the bad guy for not sacrificing my financial stability for his mistakes. I started avoiding family gatherings. I knew if I showed up, it would just be more pressure, more lectures about family loyalty. So I stopped going to Sunday dinners, stopped responding to group texts. I needed space. Then, about a month after Tyler's initial request, my mom showed up at my apartment. She didn't call first, just knocked on my door one Saturday morning. I almost didn't answer, but I knew she'd just keep knocking. She came in and immediately started crying. Said Tyler was depressed, that the stress of the debt was destroying him, that he was barely eating, that she was worried about him. She begged me to reconsider, said she'd pay me back herself if she could, but they didn't have the money. I asked her point blank why Tyler didn't have a job. She got defensive. Said he was trying, that it wasn't easy finding something in his field. I asked what his field was. She said business management. I said there were tons of entry-level business jobs. She said those were beneath him. That he didn't go to an expensive school to work some dead-end position. That's when I snapped. I told her Tyler's education wasn't my responsibility, that I'd paid for my own education while working 2 jobs, and he could do the same. That I was done being treated like the family bank just because I made responsible choices. She left crying, said I'd changed, that I used to be such a sweet girl and now I was cold and bitter, that she didn't recognize me anymore. I felt guilty for about an hour. Then I felt angry, because the truth was, they didn't know me. They'd never bothered to get to know me. I was always just the backup kid, the one who didn't need attention because Tyler needed it more. 2 weeks later, my cousin Jennifer called me. We'd always been close. She said she needed to tell me something, but I had to promise not to say where I heard it. I promised. She told me Tyler had a job, had one for over a year. He was working remotely for a tech startup, making decent money. Not amazing, but enough to cover his loan payments and then some. I asked why he was pretending to be unemployed. She said she didn't know the full story, but she'd seen him posting about work stuff on a private Instagram account, talking about meetings and projects. She'd only seen it because he'd forgotten to remove her from the private account when he made it. I felt my blood pressure spike. Tyler had been lying to everyone. He had a job and money, but was pretending to be broke so he wouldn't have to pay his debt, and my parents were covering for him without even knowing the truth. I asked Jennifer to send me screenshots. She did. There were dozens. Posts about work from home setups, complaints about video calls, celebrating project completions, time-stamped over the past 14 months. He'd been employed this entire time, while guilting me for not helping him, while letting our parents stress about his finances, while making me look like the villain to our entire family. I spent the next week digging deeper. I created a fake account and requested to follow his private Instagram. He accepted. Guess he didn't check who was following him. I scrolled through everything, found posts about buying new gaming equipment, posts about weekend trips with friends, posts about eating at expensive restaurants. He wasn't broke. He was just spending his money on whatever he wanted and refusing to be responsible for his debt. But she had been lying about this for years. Well, not years, but over a year. And he dragged me through guilt and family drama to avoid his own responsibilities. I had no idea the full extent of their betrayal. Not just Tyler's lies, but my parents' willingness to pressure me without ever fact-checking his story. They'd taken his word as truth and made me the villain. That's when I decided I wasn't going to just walk away quietly. Tyler needed to face consequences, and my family needed to see who he really was. I put together a full presentation, screenshots of Tyler's private Instagram, photos he'd posted about his job, his purchases, his lifestyle, timestamps showing he'd been employed for over a year while claiming to be unemployed, bank statements I managed to access through some creative methods I won't detail here. Everything I needed to prove he'd been lying. Then I planned a family dinner, told my parents I wanted to apologize and make things right, that I'd been thinking about Tyler's situation and wanted to discuss it with everyone present. They were thrilled, said they knew knew I'd come around. That family was more important than pride. Tyler showed up looking smug, like he'd won, like I was finally going to cave and pay his debt. My parents looked relieved. My aunt and uncle were there too. They'd always been Team Tyler. We sat down for dinner. My mom made Tyler's favorite meal. After we ate, my mom said she was so glad we could all come together, that this was what family was about. I said I agreed, that I wanted to clear the air about Tyler's situation. I pulled out my laptop and said I'd done some research to figure out how to best help him. My parents looked pleased. Tyler looked nervous. When I showed them the evidence, everything changed. I started with the screenshots, showed them post after post of Tyler talking about his job, about his projects, about his income. My mom's face went white. My dad's jaw clenched. Tyler tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I showed them the photos of his purchases, the gaming setup that cost over $2,000. The concert tickets, the weekend trips, all time stamped over the past year. Tyler started making excuses, said it was a side gig, that it barely paid anything. I pulled up the salary range for his position at the startup. Entry level was $45,000 a year, more than enough to cover his loan payments. My dad asked Tyler directly if he had a full-time job. Tyler stammered, said it was complicated. My dad asked again, yes or no. Tyler finally admitted yes. He'd been working for 14 months. My mom asked why he'd lied, why he'd let them worry, why he'd asked me for money when he could afford his own payments. Tyler said he wanted to save his money for other things, that the debt was their responsibility since they'd taken out the loans, that he shouldn't have to sacrifice his lifestyle because they didn't plan better. The room went silent. My aunt looked horrified. My dad looked like he wanted to flip the table. My mom started crying, not the manipulative crying from before, the hurt kind. My dad told Tyler to get out. Tyler tried to argue, said they were overreacting. My dad stood up and told him again, get out. Tyler left. After he was gone, my parents apologized to me, said they should have questioned Tyler's story, that they should have believed me when I said I couldn't afford to help. My mom cried and said she was ashamed of how they'd treated me, that I'd always been the responsible one, and they'd taken that for granted. I told them I appreciated the apology, but things needed to change. I wasn't going to be the backup plan anymore. I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into fixing problems that weren't mine. If they wanted a relationship with me, it had to be equal. No more golden child favoritism. They agreed, and for the first time in my life, I felt like they actually saw me. Tyler tried to reach out a few weeks later, sent a long text about how I'd embarrassed him, how I'd turned the family against him, how I was vindictive and cruel. I blocked him. My parents cut him off financially, told him if he had a job, he needed to figure out his own expenses. He moved out of their house within a month. Last I heard, he's actually paying his loans now. Not because he wants to, but because he has to. My relationship with my parents is better than it's ever been. They check in on me, ask about my life, treat me like I matter. It took a public confrontation to get there, but we got there. I don't regret what I did. Tyler needed a wake-up call, and my family needed to see that enabling him wasn't helping anyone. Conclusion, summary. What I learned from all of this is that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them from their own choices. Tyler had every opportunity to be responsible. He chose not to be because he knew people would bail him out. My parents had every opportunity to question his story. They chose not to because it was easier to believe him than hold him accountable. I spent years being the invisible kid, the one who didn't need attention, the one who figured things out on her own. And honestly, that made me stronger. I learned how to be independent, how to work hard, how to set boundaries. Tyler learned none of those things because he never had to. And when I finally said no, it forced everyone to see the truth, that he wasn't the golden child. He was just a guy who'd been enabled for too long. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just done accepting less than I deserve from my family, from anyone. And that feels better than any apology ever could. Subscribe if you've ever been the responsible sibling.